Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give this a couple of minutes for the room to fill up. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Matt Amundson. I'm the new CMO here at Census. I'm joined by two awesome, visionary, significantly more intelligent people than myself, Vijay, Iyengar, and Manav, Bhatia. We're going to have a discussion here starting in the next few minutes. But just to get things started, for those of you who are already here, I'm dialing into this webinar from San Francisco, California. We have a brand new office here at Census, which is fantastic. It still has the new car smell, if you're wondering. But if you feel comfortable sharing, please drop into the chat where you're dialing in from. And be sure to use the chat feature throughout today's presentation. We are going to hold the answers to all questions until we make our way through the presentation, but we will be sure to answer everyone's questions in the remaining time that we have as we make it through. So welcome, everyone. Yeah, we're starting to fill in now, which is nice. All right, where are people? We have any chat from, oh yes, DC, New York. All right. Love New York. California, my home state. San Francisco, good to see you, Peter. Vijay, where are you in the Bay right now?
Yeah, I'm in San Francisco as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, been here for about 10 years, so I guess it's home now.
Feel the same. And you, Manav, are you in the Bay today?
I am in the beautiful Pacific Northwest.
Oh, love that. Summertime in the Northwest is fantastic. Are you in Seattle or?
I am. We call it this to be our demo season. We sort of bring people over around this time of the year, and then once they settle in, that's when they realize the reality of Seattle weather.
That's brutal.
See, I love Seattle, though. Great food scene there. Speaking of food scenes, John dialing in from Chicago. I do believe Chicago is dominating right now from a food scene perspective. That's at least in my personal opinion. Awesome.
We have Maxim from Paris, so I think that probably from a food scene perspective, they'll probably be way more dominating than anybody else.
Well, that's just Europe in general, but love Paris, had an office there once, miss it. All right, well, let's kick us off and get us started. For those of you who don't know, we're utilizing a new bit of technology today called Contrast. Hopefully you guys like the layout here and like the chat functionality. Good question to poll the audience. What webinar service are you using? Are you happy with it? Or is anybody making any real strides? I think Contrast is the first new tool that I've used since Zoom. Super, super happy with it. Really cool layout, at least from my end, but I've not been a viewer of it. So would love to get everybody's feedback as we think about making our long-term bets on this piece of software for our webinar strategy. Teams, yep. Makes sense. Cool. So as I mentioned earlier, for those of you who did not hear, I am Matt Amundson, the new CMO here at Census. Thrilled to be here. I'm joined today by Vijay Iyengar and Manav Bhatia from Mixpanel and Google, respectively. And our plan today is to discuss the past, present, and future of event analytics. So we'll be talking about that in its sort of historical run. Hopefully we'll be able to throw in some interesting anecdotes for you guys. And I'm sure you all have your own interesting anecdotes around your evolution of tracking, product events, but also product usage and how you have been developing your products going forward. So as I mentioned, we'll talk about the past, present, and future here, the very humble beginnings of web analytics. The present, which is, as we move more and more into event analytics driven by, incredible businesses like Mixpanel, and how this is becoming the new standard for our modern customer journeys. Vijay will go through a couple examples from some of their customers, both Yelp and Uber. I'm sure you guys are all very familiar. And then also how go-to-market teams can use that data for both the way they analyze the programs and how to take next best actions with their prospects and customers. And then we're going to hear from Manav at Google on the future and how this impacts things like Gen AI and data enrichment. The reality is it's the summer of 2023. We can't do a webinar without talking about generative AI. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with Census, and bear with me, I am just becoming familiar with Census. I'm in my 6th week of working here. Census is the first data activation platform built on top of the data warehouse. So I think one of the things that I found very interesting about Census as I considered joining the organization was this idea that you could essentially just cut out a CDP or cut out the need necessarily for a CDP and start pulling data directly from your cloud data warehouse, be it BigQuery, Snowflake, Redshift, or otherwise, and then activate that data directly into your downstream business tools. Like for myself, it would be, our various marketing platforms, whether it's our marketing automation system or a HubSpot user, or any of the ad tech that we use, or a combination thereof, all so that we, can engage with our audiences across all channels. And as this business has evolved, Census specifically, we've built a way for you to build dynamic audiences directly from your warehouse with a no-code, what we call Audience Hub, which is great. So you can see very simply from this diagram, Census just sits in between your data warehouse and all your downstream systems. We give you the ability to build an audience and push that audience into various different marketing platforms. We have a bunch of really cool customers. I will admit, as I've become familiar, I was going through this deck the other day, and I told my wife that Skims was a customer. She was very excited about that. So that's cool. But in addition to that, we have some other great brands. One in particular, Canva, I think everybody knows, which was a big part of the reason why I joined Census, was I thought Canva just had absolutely dynamite marketing in terms of their understanding of my customer journey and the messaging that they were able to drive towards me. I was like, wow, these guys are incredible. And then when I found out that a lot of that was powered by Census, I was like, okay, that's a company that I absolutely have to join. So very excited about that. If you have any questions about Census, please feel free to drop them into the chat function, but we're gonna keep moving now. Before we dive directly into this presentation, I'd love for both Vijay and Manav to give a brief introduction to themselves. So Vijay, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. I'm Vijay. I lead the product team at Mixpanel. I've been at Mixpanel for about 7 years now, originally on the engineering team, working on our backend infrastructure and our analytics database. And then about 2 years ago, moved over to the dark side into product management. And so now lead the product team, and I'm based out of San Francisco. Prior to this, I was on the data team at Uber, building out a lot of the internal data infrastructure, which back in the day, this was pre-data warehouse, pre-tools like Census. We had to build a lot of these things in-house. So I've dealt with a lot of those pain points, both from the engineering side and now as a consumer and user of these tools. So always excited to chat about data and analytics. I'll pass it over to Manav.
Thanks, Vijay, and great to meet you, folks. I lead strategic partnerships at Google, including our partnership with Mixpanel. Prior to Google, I spent roughly 22 years with Microsoft, where I ran their partner strategy for data analytics and AI. So data is super close to me. The way I think about it is that there are only 3 things that worth caring about in life. The first one being your own health, the second one being your loved ones, your family, your friends, etc. And the third one is data. And that order may change given how important data is becoming to health and keeping your family together as well. So I'm super excited to have the conversation with all of you. Right.
Awesome. Thank you guys both. Yeah, thank you both so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you. So 1990s, we've come a long way from hit counters, and I'd love just a show of hands for anybody who's as old as I am, who's on the call and remembers hit counters. I remember, just personal anecdote here, having a GeoCities website in 1998, and I was actually tracking it. It never got to the triple digits, but talk about high school football in my area wasn't super popular, but I tried my best in dabbling with that. A couple of my friends logged in maybe once or twice, so thanks, guys. Anybody else in the chat have experience using just basic hit counters on your website just to track how many people had come by? No. Okay, that's fine. We've got a young group of people. Vijay,
I definitely know the GeoCities lifestyle, the blog spots, and it's interesting. It was a whimsical time on the internet. Let's say that, where you're
anything was possible.
Anything's possible. It's everyone's exploring very early. But yeah, I think it's interesting at that time where it was a lot more about these static websites that are about broadcasting content to the world, like sharing thoughts, sharing perspectives, the blog lifestyle. And I think what's interesting there is at the time, the technology just wasn't there for everyone to build interactive experiences. So it was very one-way communication. Your users aren't communicating with you at all. Maybe the rare site has comments or something like that, but it was very one-way. And when it's that simple, the only thing you can really do is count hits, count maybe time spent on the site. But I think the analytics kind of reflects what the technology is capable of at that time.
Yeah. I just remember hits being a term that was used so much. How many hits is your website getting? That's not something we say anymore, but it certainly was fun back in those days. Awesome. And then in steps our good friends, right? Manav and team. So way back in 2005, Google acquired a business at the time called Urchin, which eventually evolved into becoming what we all know now as Google Analytics. It's become basically the source, the gold standard of what's happening on our website. Okay, people are trying to get a hold of me. My apologies. Is a gold standard for what was happening on your website. Not only just how many people were coming, but where they were spending their time, what their bounce rates were looking like. So you could get a good sense of, is this page designed well? Is it engaging? Do people want to spend time here? Are the pages where people are spending the most time going to drive them towards making a purchase decision? So that has been, in large part, for the sort of breadth of the last 20 years, the primary driver around how we think about how our prospects and our customers engage with us online. But there was a couple, sort of moments in there where things really started to change, and the reality of needing tools like or platforms like Mixpanel became very seminal. And I'll pause my thoughts on Mixpanel, but I've been a gigantic fan of Mixpanel for a very, very long time. One of the most seminal changes was obviously the introduction of the iPhone and mobile browsing. And then, within a very, very short period of time, the amount of people who were browsing the internet over mobile started to overtake desktop. So that was a massive change. And then as a result of that, things like properties started to be developed. And then we're all desperate to hear from Manav on this, but GA4, it's been coming. It's what is your take? What is Google's take? How are we all going to survive the next version of Google Analytics?
So the way I think about it, right, is we're taking the next step forward in not just looking at analytics, right? And I want to be conscious about that. Our endeavor is not to sort of compete with the likes of Mixpanel or other analytics companies. The focus really is making sure that we're providing a set of user experience data sets that then help augment or enrich the sort of the streams of data that you're likely to get from other sources, right? And the idea is to present a complete picture of the user interaction with your website or your application, etc. I think that really is the endeavor. And then the endeavor is, one is the enrichment piece, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But then how do you democratize and make sure that those analytics are available to the right people in the organization, right? In a self-serve fashion that allows them to make decisions faster, right? And that's sort of our window to the world, a window to the future of how we think about the next wave of analytics, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about it when we talk about the future, right, and where we think we're going.
Awesome. Well, we're all excited and waiting on it with bated breath. Excited, nervous. It's like the premiere of Oppenheimer and Barbie this weekend. We have no idea how the culture is going to change as a result of those two films dropping at the same time. All right, moving ahead. I think I was first introduced to Mixpanel. So years ago, when I worked at Marketo, I managed the sales development team there. And so it was sort of my job to understand every new SaaS business that was springing up here in Silicon Valley, because, largely we're selling to startup companies and sort of trying to get them not to buy traditional ESP, but to think about marketing automation. And I remember when Mixpanel dropped, and it was like this moment where people were like, wow, product analytics, like we're actually going to get a sense of the way people are using these products. And as a go-to-market professional, not just thinking about their journey towards a purchase, but like actually once they've transacted and they're in product and they're using it, whether that's a free trial or freemium or whatever, just having real understanding around that, I thought was a real seminal moment in the SaaS industry. And largely, as we talked about the shift from desktop to mobile, the massive amount of apps that were springing up, especially mobile apps, where we're trying to figure out like who's using this, does this feature work? And what I loved so much about the Mixpanel value proposition was, it was really driving organizations to think critically about the products that they were building and stay on track. It was like, what do you really want to do here? How do you want your customers to sort of view and value the product that you create? And I thought that the first wave of product analytics coming from Mixpanel was truly like the first product that was out there that was telling you, this is how your customers use your product. This is what they like. Oh, you're bringing a new feature, they don't like it, or you should pivot away from this, or lean more into this. I thought that was fantastic. And Marketo was an early user of Mixpanel, so we were getting actual real data around what parts of the product people were enjoying most, what were the sections where people were frustrated, and that became such a critical component to the way we built Marketo going forward. Now I will say I don't know where Marketo stands with Mixpanel these days, but back in those days it was so critical to our business, and it opened my eyes to a whole new way of thinking about a customer journey, not just from the sort of the marketing and sales motion, but actual usage of the data. So initially, this was kind of the story that product analytics were built for product people. This is a pull from a previous version of the Mixpanel website, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. So, Vijay, I'll let you kind of take it from here.
Yeah, for sure. I think early Mixpanel was really focused on what you're saying, which is that as businesses were going from this Web 1.0 to Web 2.0 transition, right? They're thinking more about building interactive experiences where users are actually using their app as a product, not just their app as digital real estate that they're kind of marketing themselves as. And I think what's required there is understanding how your users interact with this new interface that you've built. And so I think the core manifestation of this was mobile, where in mobile, every app is interactive. It's not like a static experience. And so you really need to understand, and there's no page views, right? There's no hits in mobile. So you need to understand what are the sequences of the actions that people are doing. And that was actually an even earlier Mixpanel landing page, which is that actions speak louder than page views. And I think that really got people thinking about, okay, what are the actions that people are taking in the product? And the other big insight there is that there's reporting tools where you get a standard set of metrics every day, week, or month that's kind of, okay, top line health. So I think in the web analytics world, it's just number of page views every week, and bounce rate, and a few of these key health metrics. But then there's what we think of as analysis, which is actually going in a deep diving and understanding sort of root causing and prioritizing. Like, okay, our bounce rate has spiked. Why is that? And that's not like a single question that you answer. It's a series of questions. It's like, let's slice it by region and let's drill down to users that came from one source versus another. And then let's go drill into what did users do instead after they bounced. And I think what like a big challenge for a lot of our early users, and it's still a challenge for users today, is using reporting type tools that are built for just producing a canned dashboard to do analysis, which is actually much more of an ad hoc and exploratory workflow. And Mixpanel is built in a kind of first-class way to do data exploration, which is, each question that you get answered creates another question, and then you enter that loop of asking and answering questions. And it's usually that flow that produces unique insights that inform how you should improve your product, what you should double down on, what you should pivot from, et cetera. And so one of the things that we've realized throughout the last decade of building this is that workflow and that ability to ask and answer a series of questions and drill deeper on user behavior is useful not just for product teams, but it's increasingly useful for more teams within the company. Because everyone is the user experience and customer experience is important to every team in the company increasingly. And so I think that's kind of what's leading to us kind of expanding beyond just the product team in recent months and trying to serve everyone in our organization.
Awesome. All right. So I think the next evolution of that is really to start bringing, to number one, start tracking events, right? Event tracking and event analytics are, I think, on everyone's mind. They're certainly on mine as a marketer. But how do we think about bringing those into the warehouse, and what does that mean in terms of where we were previously, which was relying more heavily on like SDKs?
Yeah, for sure. So I think this is a misconception, or rather an early conception of Mixpanel that I think is starting to get outdated, which is that when people think about Mixpanel, they think about client-side SDKs. It's like Mixpanel is an SDK that I put in my website or mobile app to track events. And on the side, it gives me analytics. And what we're seeing increasingly, especially with our larger customers, is that they decouple the two things. There are plenty of ways to get user activity in a modern world, right? Like you have plenty of these data collection tools that write directly to the data warehouse. You have tools like Snowplow or Rudderstack or things like that are event collectors that put data in the warehouse. But then you want to be able to activate that data and use that for analytics. The other piece is that event data is coming increasingly from unexpected places. Like, for example, you might have your application database. Like in the case of Uber, they have their trips database, right? Those aren't events that are necessarily firing from their app, but every time someone takes a trip, a record is written somewhere to some database for their app to even function. And those can be modeled as events as well. I think that's the other big unlock that's starting to happen is people are realizing event data is not necessarily something that needs to be tracked. It can also be something that can be modeled out of data you already have. Fundamentally, the event-based data model is really powerful because it really only requires two things: a timestamp and a user ID. Like what time was the event performed and who performed it. And then everything else is fully generic. You can have as many properties as you want. Like in the Uber case, right? Like what type of trip was it? Was it Uber X or Uber Pool? Was it a delivery trip? How long did the trip take? Those are all additional pieces of context you can add. And so that data can come from anywhere. The second big shift that we're seeing is that the data warehouse, the cloud data warehouse, is increasingly becoming the center of gravity for data organizations, where these tools are super scalable. They've really decoupled compute and storage, so it's extremely cheap and extremely easy to load in data from any source. They speak a SQL standard, so there's this ecosystem of tools that write to and read from the data warehouse really easily. Tools like Fivetran and Stitch and others make it really easy to load data in the warehouse, and then tools like Census, of course, make it really easy to push data out. And so what we're increasingly seeing is people are actually connecting their data warehouse directly to Mixpanel instead of tracking from an SDK, which is, lets you get access to not just product data, but all data in your organization, and let you do that in a way that doesn't require any data engineering effort, right? Like basically there's always this trade-off between, do we use our highest quality data, or which takes up a lot of engineering bandwidth, or do we do the quick and dirty way? And I think what's increasingly possible now is beating that trade-off, where you can get the high quality data and have no extra engineering effort, which I think is unlocking more teams like the Yelps and Ubers of the world to be doing analytics on their trusted data with much less effort. And so I think we sort of saw this with early adopters, like some of our larger customers like Yelp and Uber, where they have internal data teams that are bringing in their sort of app tracked data, their transactional data, their other data from systems of record into an internal data warehouse, whether that's something like a Redshift or Databricks or something like that, and then piping that data into Mixpanel. And what that enables is effectively that it becomes easier and easier to do self-serve exploratory analytics on data that these teams already have. So I think that's something that we're really betting big on, and we're seeing those as kind of those big mega trends that more and more teams are adopting, and it genuinely works at scale.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the direction that you guys are going, it feels like the smartest bet to make. It feels inevitable, right? Is that, you guys feel this way, we feel this way, which is that the cloud data warehouse becomes kind of the center of the universe, due to just storage and speed and the just shocking amount of data that you can collect there. It only makes sense. It's funny because I spent a large part of my career operating with Salesforce as the center of the universe, but it feels like there is a shift now where, in addition to product managers wanting this level of analysis, actually marketers and sales professionals want this level of analysis, especially as things like product usage become increasingly the biggest sign of not only buying intent, but also opportunities for expansion, opportunities to upsell and cross-sell. It just makes sense. And you think about tools like, Marketo or Eloqua or HubSpot, they are built to be reactionary towards engagement behavior, but they are not built to be reactionary to product usage behavior. And so, for you guys to be able to build the analysis around that, and then for a product like ours to be able to say, like, well, it's stored there, it's now been analyzed, you understand what the next best action should be, and then you fire that into your marketing systems to create a significantly better experience, one where there's real trust starts to be built between the customer or the prospect and the brand that says, hey, you know what I'm doing, and you're serving me something that is actually relevant to me, as opposed to, I downloaded a white paper, here's a complimentary piece of content, but something that is much more akin to the way people actually buy, which is I've been using your product, or multiple other users from my organization have been using your product. Like, here's a way for us to be collaborative. Here's a great use case, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, the idea here dovetails nicely with what we're going to discuss on the next slide, which is, pulling that data that is created in the warehouse directly into the systems that you use for engagement is just the logical next step here. So analytics and activation for marketing teams. It's a brave new world. And I think the smartest marketers on the planet are waking up to this reality right now, where pulling their analysis from Mixpanel and utilizing it in their marketing is critically important. Vijay, I'm sure you have customers that are doing this now.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the really interesting insights for us about 6 months ago is when we did a survey of our customer base. We found out that in around 50% of our existing customers, the primary user was actually marketing, and even though we were a product analytics tool. And I think what that really illuminates is the fact that this event-based data model is useful not just for product teams, but it's also useful for marketing and growth teams and other teams within an organization. That's really our bet, is just user activity. What did users do at each point in time is generically applicable, and we sort of saw that in our own data. And then the other piece there is that I think marketers are increasingly getting more savvy about how they think about targeting, where it's no longer just about top of funnel. Like, am I bringing in users that signed up? The real question asked now is, am I bringing in users that stuck around a week later? Right.
Yes.
That's like real hard ROI there. And showing that actually means that your marketing analytics tool and your product analytics tool can't be two different things. You can't be measuring top of funnel in one tool and retention in another tool, because then you can't actually bridge that and see the impact on retention. And so that's really why in the last 6 months, we've been investing in a lot more in marketing analytics and had a pretty big launch recently, which essentially enables marketing teams to start answering kind of the down funnel impact of their work, which especially in this time where budgets are shrinking and it's really, you have to make these hard ROI choices. It becomes really powerful and really compelling when you can make the case to your CEO that, hey, this campaign is actually bringing in users that stick around. So we need to be doubling down on that. So even being able to make that statement backed up with data is, I think, something that's pretty difficult to do, like surprisingly difficult to do, given that it's 2023 and AI is taking over the world and all that. But I think that's something that's possible in Mixpanel. And what it really leans on is that this event-based data model is so simple and powerful, right? If we go back to the hit counting days, a hit is basically a page view. And the other realization for us is a page view is just a special case of an event. A page view is this user viewed this page at this time with these UTM parameters. That's it.
Yep.
And so tracking page views is something that our SDK now does out of the box with all these UTM parameters. And then it becomes, we have this one-click template where you can actually get the impact of whatever campaigns you're running on your traffic and then on your retention, which is really, really the compelling thing that was not possible before. So I think it's really an unlock in how marketers level up their analytics and their prioritization game. And then I think that the second piece is that event-based data is useful not just for analytics and observing what's happening, but also for activation, which is I think where Census really comes in. And our own team uses Census quite a bit at Mixpanel to take that same usage data that we're analyzing in Mixpanel and then build these groups of users that meet certain criteria or might have a propensity to retain, and then send very targeted messages to them. And then of course feed that data back of who engaged with which messages so that we can build that virtuous cycle of optimizing the ones that work and then pivoting from the ones that don't.
I was going to say it's a totally virtuous cycle, right? Like you're providing the analytics, you're utilizing that to create dynamic audiences, and you can see examples of what those are, at a very basic level. And then as you start to engage them through those channels, then you feed that same data right back into Mixpanel to have an understanding of what people did as a result of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think the power of it is that you're not limited to these canned reports or these canned activation metrics activation technologies. Like you have both the simplicity of something out of the box, but also the ability to go deeper and more advanced. Like in Mixpanel, you can open up any of these reports and actually dig in and ask all those follow-up questions. And in Census, of course, you can peel back any of those audiences and see the raw SQL if you want to go deeper. So it's like both a low floor and a high ceiling. So there's really no excuse to kind of to play around and go deep, because it's easy to get started and you can, sky's the limit, which is I think really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Great. So let's keep moving forward here. So this is your story, event analytics for product-led growth.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is something that I bet a lot of B2B in particular companies are thinking through right now, or companies that have a B2B component, which is product-led growth, right? Where, it used to be the case that you market your product, the customer buys your product, and then they start using your product. And with product-led growth, what's often changed is that you market your product, people start using your product, and then they buy the product. Or your product itself has some growth or viral component where you start using your product, the artifacts of that usage are actually bringing more users in, and then you transact and buy the product, and then you expand from there. So what that really means is that thinking about your product as another acquisition channel becomes really, really important. And that acquisition channel, the power of that channel is that you have access to this rich product usage data. How are people using your product? Are they getting to these key value moments in the product? Are they inviting others? Those are all signals that you can start leveraging to get a lot smarter about who you target with your sales outreach and your marketing outreach. And so we ourselves at Mixpanel went through this journey because I think as a company, we started in this pre-product-led growth period. And so we had to rethink a lot of our internal systems and processes of how we did product-led growth at Mixpanel. I think one of the interesting things is how much, culture and strategy shape tooling, and then tooling shapes culture and strategy. And so it was just as much of like an org design problem of, okay, in this product-led growth world, how do product marketing and sales work together? And then what we realized there is actually these three teams are operating off of three completely siloed data sets. Like Matt, as you were mentioning, the sales team, like for many teams, Salesforce is sort of the data warehouse for go-to-market teams, right? Where it's kind of it starts as your CRM, it's a data entry tool for sales. Gradually, you do more and more integrations with Salesforce, and it kind of becomes its own, data warehouse. That's I think it's good at a lot of things, but it's not a very good data warehouse, right? It's not good scalable. It's not good for scalable, high volume event data. It doesn't have SQL, any of that. And so we saw our sales teams working out of Salesforce, marketing teams working out of Marketo, and the product teams working out of Mixpanel. And first of all, you can't have 3 different teams work together in a product-led growth motion if they're operating off of 3 different tools, 3 different versions of the truth. The second thing, so then what we started to do is, okay, let's integrate these tools together, right? And when you're integrating, n different tools together, and if you're like doing the math there, that's like n squared different connections that you have to make between those tools, and that's a lot of effort. And so what we realized is, okay, if we want to actually get these tools to work together, we need to adopt a different data strategy. And so what we did was we treated each of these tools as both as spokes, right? Where like a tool like Salesforce is where sales can input sales data. And Marketo is where we get like our marketing email data. And Mixpanel, product analytics, is where we get our product usage data. All of that funnels into a central place, which is we're on Google Cloud, so we use Google BigQuery. So all that data funnels into BigQuery, and then from there, we're able to build like a 360 view of, okay, this is a user journey, this is an account, this is a set of accounts that we consider our ICP, our ideal customer profile, and then we can federate that data back out into all of those tools. So basically, our data architecture resembles more of this hub and spoke model, which I think we have on the next slide, which I think is super useful to understand. Where all these tools right to our data warehouse, we model and enrich the data via dbt, and then we federate it out from using Census to all the tools. And so what that really enables is all teams operating off of the same version of the truth. We have these kind of golden data models of like what an account means to Mixpanel that's shared across all the teams. And then it actually it lets our product analytics tool not just be about product usage data, but also contain data about like our sales funnel. Funnels are not just user funnels anymore; they're also sales funnels, right? And so our sales team actually looks at our sales funnel in Mixpanel because that data is coming via Salesforce into the data warehouse and into Mixpanel. And all of these integrations are completely no code, right? Like if you can, they're basically managed by writing SQL off of BigQuery and then piping that data into all these tools, and that's fully managed for us. So what that really enables is all teams to be working, still using the tools that are there, built for their domain, but there's no silos because they're all operating off of the same version of the truth. So I guess the core point here is that if you're trying to adopt a product-led growth strategy, you need to be thinking about tooling as a really key part of the strategy, because if your tools aren't built for that, then the strategy is not going to actually operationalize. And so thinking through that, you kind of need these teams to be operating off the same version of the truth. And we found this hub and spoke model to be a really elegant way to keep things simple and not have that n squared problem, but also get all teams to be working off of the same data set.
I just have to ask, the journey from your previous architecture to this architecture, can you talk about that? I'm sure you were driving a big portion of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had we had definitely had a lot of engineering effort, and I definitely maybe glossed over how difficult it was to make the transition. I'll say a couple things. So the first thing is to get the engineers, like the software engineers, really engaged with this problem and think about it as like a true engineering effort versus kind of a side thing that the RevOps team or the sales team setting up. Like actually get the engineers to engage with this. Like, hey, we're potentially dropping a lot of leads on the floor, which leads to higher revenue, which is more equity value for you. So you need to care about this problem. The second thing is starting with getting the data all centralized in BigQuery was the first kind of key unlock for us, where once you get the data from all these tools into BigQuery, from there, being able to write SQL and model it and transform it really fast was just kind of a godsend for us in terms of you can iterate very quickly, right? Like at least all the data is in the same place. Everyone has access to BigQuery. It's like at least all there. Then you can, like as a follow-on, take on the challenge of, okay, how do we get this trusted data into the systems? So I guess largely we built this left to right is my quick answer there, where it's getting all the data centralized in BigQuery and then one by one start federating it out. And then of course it's an iterative process, and making sure engineering and sales and product are all kind of aligned on that is super important. But the other piece I'd say is like it does require some top-down buy-in where you have to get your CPO and CRO to treat this as a priority, but then things move really fast, and being the light at the other end of the tunnel is amazing because everybody has visibility working off the same data. It's really easy to make changes to things like that. So yeah.
Awesome. So just last bit here, as we think about like how you're actually using it and combining event data with the warehouse, like let's talk about your actual use case here for a moment.
Sure. Yeah. I think this is maybe a bit of an unconventional use case, but I think one that's added a lot of value to our team. So for B2B teams in particular, the qualitative context matters just as much as quantitative, where you may not have that many deals, but the why you won or lost that 200K ARR deal is super valuable. And so let's just take the win-loss example, right? Every time we win or lose a deal, our sales team writes notes. They write that in Salesforce. As I mentioned, everything from Salesforce gets ETL'd into BigQuery automatically. So all those win-loss notes are in BigQuery. And what our product team really cares about is, okay, what is the synthesis of reasons we've lost? Who are we losing to? What can we do better, right? And can we slice that by segment and ARR and region to see if there's any regional or segment-based differences? Of course, asking all our PMs to go into SQL and do that on the fly is just not very collaborative and it doesn't really work. And what was really compelling about this architecture and Census in particular is I think the key thing it enables is it lets you build internal tools without writing any code. So literally in the course of a day, we set up this push from Census into Notion and Slack, which is where our PM team lives, that is the feed of all of the win-loss notes, right? And then the really powerful thing about this being on the data warehouse is you can continuously enrich it with new information. So for example, one of the first feature requests we got for this internal tool is, hey, can we get ARR on here for new opportunities? Can we get the existing ARR and then the potential upsell ARR as two different fields? And that literally took 5 minutes of editing the SQL query, click resync, and then both Slack and Notion were instantly updated. No code, no deploying a new script or anything like that. It was just an internal tool powered by this rich data set. And because all the data lives in BigQuery, not just the sales data, it's more powerful than a point-to-point integration between Salesforce and Notion and Slack because you can join across everything. That's the superpower of data warehouses, is joins. So I think we have a bunch of internal tools like this that are built this way. Like we've got our win-loss feed, we've got our NPS survey results, we've got product feedback from our customers, direct feedback. Pretty much any data stream all lands in BigQuery, and so it's really easy for us to kind of pick and choose what we want. And as a product leader, that's really important. Is effectively, I want the teams to have all the context, and so these are essentially giving the team the right information diet to make decisions, so that I'm not a bottleneck, so no one else is a bottleneck to making decisions. So I think that's one really compelling thing. It's like using this architecture to build internal tools without writing code.
Awesome. Love it. All right. I want to switch gears here a little bit, and I want to start talking, because we talked about the past, we talked about the present. I want to start talking about the future a little bit. And who better to tell us about the future than Manav at Google? So Manav, take it away.
Thanks, Matt. And I think Vijay really set it up well, right? I mean, how do you bring together all of that data into BigQuery, make it super enriched, and then be able to get, qualitative insights that are available to across the organization, right? And I think that's the core of product-led growth, right? Having the right analytics, really making sure that across the organization, everybody understands, right, how the product is behaving and where the next growth opportunity is. Now, the way we think about the future, right, it comes in a couple of different pillars. Right? The first thing, right, and I'll touch upon generative AI. I know everybody's anxious to hear about how we work with that, but I want to talk about data enrichment piece first. Historically, and even today, for most organizations, data enrichment means you pull in additional data from a set of disparate systems, right? We just spoke about how we pull in Salesforce data, how we could pull in Notion data, win-loss data, ARR revenue data, etc. I truly believe, right, and as Google, we're working very strongly on it, is data enrichment also potentially requires pulling in third-party data, right? Imagine a large organization where you work with ecosystem partners. As you think about the sales pipeline, it's not just your own sales pipeline, but sales pipeline from your partners. How do you bring together in the secure, privacy controlled way so that you're getting a comprehensive view to your business? To think about that as second party data. But then, imagine being able to take that a step further and being able to bring in third party data sets into it. Credit ratings from Equifax, Crunch-based data about venture capital funding, or DNB data around organizations. How do we bring it all together so that the 360-degree view that you consider of your customer is not just dependent on your organization knowledge or limited by it, but has the ability to tap into external data sources as well? Not sure how many of you are familiar with Analytics Hub as an offering, right, that Google has, where we're really focused on creating these data exchanges that allow you to share data across organizations or subscribe to third-party data sets within that to create that data enrichment framework. And that's something that we're deeply passionate about, because we believe that's where you will get to the next stage of customer insights or business insights. Now, all of that is great, right? You can tap into all of that data in. The challenge that still remains is that getting access to that data in most organizations still is extremely limited. There is that question in the chat window that says, do marketing and sales teams use BigQuery? We've got to step away from that. Nobody across the organization should worry about where that data sits. They should be able to ask the questions around the insights that they're looking for in a natural language. And that's where generative AI comes in. We're extremely excited about how generative AI could really create that democratization of insights across the organization. Right? Imagine you could ask the question, and we just spoke about it as one of the internal use cases. Show me in the last quarter the losses sorted by the maximum ARR potential, right? And that's something that we can do today with the data sets. Now marry that with the third-party data enrichment. Could we ask the question that says, show me losses for the past quarter with the maximum ARR potential across companies that have received the most amount of venture capital funding? And generative AI should then be able to look at the data sets that are available within the organization, potentially be able to look across third-party data sets that your organization has subscribed to and be able to get you that answer, right? And that sort of, think how powerful that could be if everybody in your organization has the ability to ask that question for the customers that they're working with, whether that's the marketing team or the sales team, and get that, right? And bring in that third layer of warehouse events, right? Every time there is a loss or every time there is a win, how do we make sure that that's captured as an event? How do we make sure that we're creating triggering workflows that are aligned to that, right? And that's the three pieces, when they come together, it really leaves the use cases to the imagination of the user of how they want to leverage that data and get the maximum impact from the data that sits within the boundaries of the organization and outside the boundary as well, right? And that's where we see the future going, right? We've already started to look at, being able to do this across healthcare, right? I mean, I don't know how many of you are aware of our MedPalm offering that we have on a commercial basis, right? To be able to read X-rays and be able to, get that data in a way that not only healthcare professionals, but on an average user can make sense of. So, and that really puts sky as the limit to what benefits we can derive and what insights we can derive out of data, right? And Vijay, I would love to get your perspective on that as well. I know we've been working very closely on data enrichment, generative AI. Would love to get your perspective on where you see that future going in the context of Mixpanel as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all these points are things we're deeply thinking about, right? I think the two big mega trends for us that we're looking out for and doubling down on are data warehouse is the center of gravity of all data in a company. And generative AI, I think, lowers the learning curve for working with data by 10x, right? And so I think there's a lot of challenges that emerge from that. So the question is, how do you deal with them? And so what we're thinking about with the warehouse side is, how can we have these even deeper, richer integrations with tools like BigQuery, where seamless no code to bring the data from BigQuery into a tool that's built for really fast question answer exploratory workflows. And then the second thing on generative AI is, we just launched our recent AI copilot in Mixpanel called Spark, which lets you ask and answer questions in natural language. And one of the early things we're realizing, there's two things actually. One is, it's not, with something like analytics, you want the answers to be precise. And I think that's one of the challenges with AI is it's not quite precise just yet, but it's a really great copilot. And it takes a lot of the drudgery away from the human tasks of analysis, which is finding the right events and properties to use and searching through the schemas and cutting through the noise. It's also a really good generator of hypotheses. Okay, this thing spiked or dipped. What should I be looking at next? Is a great question to ask the AI assistant. And then you can kind of marry that with a human going in and doing the exploration themselves. And the final thing is transparency, like being able to understand what the AI actually generated. Because if it generates just this, wall of SQL, that's not really transparent or easy to tell what exactly it did or how to refine it. But because Mixpanel is a much more visual interface, we can actually show you, hey, visually, this is what the AI generated, and you can edit any of these things. This is all interactive. And so I think that's really powerful for us. And we're looking at a lot of the releases that Google's making with their own AI offerings on cloud, and trying to stay at the cutting edge of the market here. But I think that there's definitely a sea change in how teams do analysis with better access to data and 10x simpler interfaces to work with, which we're really excited about.
Yeah. I think as a marketer too, the way I see all these things coming together is a much more prescriptive way of thinking about who are the right people to target and what is the right tactics to use in order to target them, whether that's through digital advertising, ads that look like this, ads that are thought leadership, or ads that are more lower funnel conversion based. Once you have an understanding of what a traditional customer does from a journey perspective in terms of how they utilize a product or use a product, but then what is the most likely outcome in terms of getting them to convert into a paid user? What do we need to? What are the directions that we need to steer them into in order to become a paid user or a longtime customer, or expand their usage, expand horizontally or vertically? Is I think the next wave that's coming from a marketing perspective, because the infrastructure for all that is being laid out by businesses like yours, which is to say, hey, this is what a customer journey looks like. These are the type of customers that buy from you. These were the tactics that actually worked. And then starting to create a little bit of a recommendation engine for marketers that say, this is, hey, look, you want to generate X amount of pipeline. You need to target companies that look like this. These are the tactics that you need to use. This is what your playbook needs to be in order to bring them in. To me, that is the future of marketing. And what will be interesting about that is marketers are going to have to get back to being a lot more creative, because the data is going to tell you exactly, you should send an email at this time, you should serve a digital ad at this time, you should give them display at this time, direct mail at this time, etc. But what is the content that they're actually receiving, and are they going to be responsive to that? Is brings us a little bit of like Back to the Future, not the film, but like take us back to the way marketing used to be when I started my career working in the beverage industry at Red Bull. It was like, hey, what's going to be the most compelling stuff that's actually going to drive them? Now that I have your attention, now that I know how to get your attention, what is that ad or what is that asset that's actually going to get them to convert? So to me, it's a very exciting time. It feels like we're sitting on the precipice of a massive sea change in the way we're going to be marketing, selling, expanding, upselling, etc. It feels like a quantum leap. All right. So for those of you who enjoyed today's discussion, Consensus is running an event next week, July 25th and 26th. That is a virtual conference, so it's dedicated to all things data and marketing. And we're going to sprinkle a little bit of magic into that as well. So day one on the 25th will be built around data teams and dive significantly deeper into points of today's discussion. Second day will be a lot of what we talked about here at the tail end in terms of how that impacts marketing and what the next wave of great marketing is actually going to look like. We have some awesome speakers from incredible brands, and so if you are so inclined, please register for that event. You can just check us out at consensus.live. And get a better understanding of the agenda for both day one and day two. With that being said, I'm going to open it up to questions. Oh, thank you, Satya, for dropping the link in there. Anybody have any questions? We just have a few minutes left here.
I think I can answer Vishal's question. Do marketing and sales team use BigQuery? I think Manav also touched on this a bit. The beauty of it is they don't have to, in that data all lands in BigQuery, but then it gets pushed out to an analysis interface like Mixpanel that everyone can use, right? So the answer is no, they don't use BigQuery directly. They use the tools that they're familiar with using. So they might be using Salesforce or Marketo. All of the data that they're entering there ends up in BigQuery and then gets pushed out to something like Mixpanel so that they can do the analysis on, hey, did these campaigns work? Or where are our leads coming from this quarter, or what are the top deals by segment? What's the conversion rate on deals in particular segments? Things like that. Those are all things they answer in Mixpanel. Completely self-serve, not blocked on a data engineer or a data scientist to answer those basic questions.
Yeah, and I would say I would give a very similar answer for sales and marketing in terms of they don't use it, but if you have a reverse ETL tool like Census, you have the ability to pipe it directly into your downstream systems that you use for either selling or marketing or creating awareness for your brand. Yeah, everyone is learning SQL. There we go, SQL. There we go.
Well, with GenAI, we're going to take that away. We make sure that nobody has to learn how to learn SQL.
Awesome. Well, I think that about does it for questions. I want to thank Manav and here we go. Sorry, Andreas.
Yeah, do you envision the stack being a PLS tool as a subset of use cases for Mixpanel? Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the PLS space is definitely interesting. Something that, so for those that don't know, it's PLS is product-led sales. And I think like we ourselves have a PLS strategy. So just like in a nutshell, basically it means how can you treat your product as a source of leads for your sales team? And what that means is it's not like everybody who's signing up is a lead. That's definitely not the right way to go. You'll piss off your sales team and create a lot of noise. But there's what you need to look for is like, what is a product qualified account, which is what is an account that exhibits the behaviors that makes it a likely lead, which for a product usually requires figuring out, okay, what are your key value moments? Like in Mixpanel, creating a report, something like a Notion or Zoom, it's like creating a page or sharing a page or having 45 minutes of a Zoom call or something like that. And then targeting those people for your sales team. You can actually do a lot of that with Mixpanel and Census today, where in Mixpanel, I think the killer use case is figuring out what your product qualified moment is, right? Like the way we recommend doing this is typically looking at, okay, what is highly correlative with somebody sticking around a month or 2 months later? Like what early behaviors lead to long-term retention? Those behaviors are probably like key activation moments for you, and you can test a few hypotheses very easily in Mixpanel. Then the next step is, the second aspect of that is what are the behavioral traits that make someone likely to do those key behaviors? That helps you determine who your ICP is, your ideal customer profile. Like for Mixpanel, it's usually engineering, product design, and growth teams at mid-market to enterprise companies, for example. And finally, all that data sits in your data warehouse, and so you can use something like Census to operationalize a PLS motion, where you can say, okay, go after those people who have been identified as my ICP, and specifically target the ones that have exhibited that behavior with some targeted sales outreach. And so that's kind of that's what I'd say is like a V0 of a PLS stack on top of this setup. And then you can go way more advanced from there, because under the hood, everything's flexible, right? So if you want to have multiple triggers with different sales playbooks for people who hit some like basic value moment versus a more advanced one, you can do that. There's also more things you can do on the upsell side, where, for example, you might have someone using the basic version of your product, but you want them to discover certain upsell features, and you can kind of see like, oh, they hit this upsell feature date. Maybe that's a good moment to reach out and share, hey, this is what you can do with this new set of features. So I think the MVP is, figuring out what correlates with retention, determining your ICP and activation moments from there, and then setting up some activation like triggers via Census to nudge those users when they're reaching those moments, and then build from that.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotal here, but one of our very first customers, Figma, used Census for this exact use case, right? This exact use case. So, they're basically taking data directly to their sales team, after, sort of recognizing what their aha moment was, and ensuring that the sales team could reach out to those users at an appropriate time. So absolutely, yes. Cool. I think that does it. We're up on time here, slightly 1 minute over. So again, let me just say, Vijay and Manav, thank you so very much for joining today's discussion, and to all the folks who stuck around, and even for those who left a little bit early, I want to say thank you to all those folks as well. You'll all be receiving a recorded version of this webinar, and if you want to get a hold of us, please feel free to reach out either on LinkedIn or directly. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Make sure that you check out Consensus next week, if not for the data, if not for the marketing, certainly for the magic. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.